I cannot believe it is already September and we are sitting here diving into all things National Long-Term Care Month. Yes, did you know everyone's favorite holiday, aka September, which is National Long-Term Care Month, kicks off, and we are starting it today by doing a whole deep dive into what the heck long-term care is and how it has changed over the years and what it looks like in today's day and age. I don't know about you, but I have a lot of family members that are now living into not just their early 90s, right? We're talking their mid to late 90s. And if I'm lucky, I'll even see some of them live well into their hundreds, which is cool. But if you take a step back, you realize that they now have been, if they retired traditionally at that 65 age mark, they've then been retired, if they live to 100, for 35 years. That means those working years that they did leading up to that had to support retirement and any expenses that come with that for 35 years. And one of those biggest expenses is healthcare. Later this month, I'll be doing a quick little video on health span versus lifespan. So keep an eye out for it. It's incredibly interesting to see how those two compare. But let's talk a little bit today about the changing landscape of long-term care and what it looks like. So to kick things off, I will say that I am always continue to be amazed and surprised at how the long-term care planning landscape continues to change and evolve, because we're changing and evolving too, right? We are living longer, we are traveling more, we have different health concerns, right? If you told people back in the 1950s they would be worried about COVID, they probably would have looked at you like you had 16 heads, but that's a common thing that we're concerned about these days. Different types of cancers, different diseases that are also no longer relevant today, right? We're not as concerned with some of the things that people were worried about in the 1920s and 1930s, which is incredible. But we do have other cares and concerns. So let's also start today by talking about the two different types of long-term care insurance that you can get, because there's a lot of confusion about, okay, is this long-term care policy, the old way of just my one-way ticket into a nursing home where I'm going to be fed some really junky pudding, maybe some colored jello if I'm lucky, and I will play bingo until the end of my time. Which, don't get me wrong, I love playing bingo as much as the next person, but that's typically the landscape we saw, right? So many of us as kids would go visit grandparents or aging relatives in a nursing home, and it was kind of this beige place where nobody wanted to go and we all dreaded it. However, long-term care has really changed, and we're going to get into later on today what that all covers. But let's first talk about the two different types of policies that now exist that might be a good fit for you. And I will warn you before we dive into this conversation, it can be difficult, right, to talk about the end of our lives or what this time period of our life might look like. However, it is so important to be doing this for yourself and your loved ones to plan now, and it can be really empowering if you let it. And make sure you are working with your financial team or you reach out to us to schedule an appointment and we can take a look at what is the right fit for you and your life and your family. So let's dive in. First, we're going to talk about the two different types of long-term care policies that we typically see. The first of which is a traditional policy where you have a premium that you're paying each month until you go into said nursing home or care facility or whatever type of care you feel is the best for you. You're making these premium payments every month, and it's that typical, once you die, they typically go away, whatever unused benefit you have, or they pass to your spouse if you have a joint policy. We are seeing a change now where there are some death benefits that are listed on these policies where you might have that payout occur with a minimum amount or whatever is remaining. Make sure you fully go through the policy to understand what options you have. The second type of policy we are seeing is called an asset-based policy. And what this means, this looks a little more like your typical whole life insurance policy, right? You are typically paying in a chunk of money, and this lump sum of money that goes in has what we would call that long-term care rider on it, right? The real intention is for you to be using this for long-term care, but if you don't, what happens to the policy? With these asset-based policies, you then have a set death benefit that is being passed on to your friends, family, favorite charity organization, whoever you deem to be the beneficiary. So one of the biggest differences is also typically we are able to get approval for policies for asset-based for people that are older or have underlying health conditions, right? That can be a big question mark. And if you have some underlying conditions or extenuating circumstances, you may need to go the asset-based route because it'll be a little easier to get coverage for you. But you will be giving that lump sum of money. So that's the very general overview, and take a deep dive into every policy to understand what it's going to cover for you and which one is the best fit for your life and your life circumstances. So the other big change that we are seeing in this long-term care policy landscape is what it's covering, right? I mentioned before that whole one-way ticket to go to a nursing home and eat your Jello and maybe never coming back. That's really changed. So long-term care, we are seeing different things now, like it's covering adult daycare, which means that you can go somewhere for the day if you need to have assistance during the day. You can go to a facility just during the day to be around other people, have help with some of your daily living activities. We also are seeing it covering in-home nursing care, right? So let's say that you had something happen and you now want someone to be able to take care of you at home. You can have somebody, and in some policies, it could even be a loved one that it will cover, or maybe your neighbor is, younger but retired, and you want them to be able to come in and care for you, or you can also have a skilled nurse. It all depends on the policy, so make sure you're reading through what these cover. And you also have to be hitting certain requirements for the policy to kick in and start your coverage. It's usually that you are unable to do some of your daily living activities like eating, bathing, being able to dress yourself is another big one. Like I said, make sure you're fully going through everything to understand. But know that we are seeing a big shift in what these policies cover. It can be the at-home, the adult daycare, which, let's be honest, sounds like a lot of fun. If I can go play bingo and then come back to my own home, I think you've got me sold. So make sure you understand what the policy is covering and what it covers for you. The other thing I want to cover today is why it's so important for you to be getting a long-term care policy. And granted, it's not always the right solution for everyone, right? You might decide, hey, I don't think I'm ever going to need it. I'm going to self-insure, which means that you don't get a policy and that you plan to pay any of these costs out of pocket, right? That's what we call self-insuring. I do want to point out, so a research study was done. I'm going to read this so I don't butcher the number. So a research study was done, and it was found that the average cost of healthcare in retirement is $413,000 for a couple retiring at the age of 65. That $413,000 is what they are going to spend on combined healthcare costs during their retirement. And that's everything from long-term care, Medicare premiums, cost of doctor visits, drugs, and prescriptions, you name it, while they're in retirement, right? And so if there are ways that we can plan and do things to help alleviate these costs, that's a really big deal. The other reason why I'm so adamant about having this conversation, not necessarily getting the plan, but at least talking about it and having some type of plan in place if you're not going to go forth with insurance, is who's going to take care of you, right? Who do you plan that will step in and care for you if you're not going to be able to go to a nursing home or to hire a nurse or go to a daycare facility? Who's that person? Because statistically speaking, we see this happen based on age and longevity, that a parent gets sick during their adult children's highest working years. And it typically falls on the daughter, albeit grown daughter, to take care of their aging parents during this time. And then what happens is she either has to step away from her family or her career or her business during her highest working years, and it really puts her at a disadvantage for her being able to continue to grow in her business and career. So ask yourself, and also have this conversation with your loved ones of, if something happened, would you even be able to step in and take care of me? What is our plan if not? And it also alleviates a lot of stress, right? Maybe you do have a family member that's able to come in and care for you and has the time. That doesn't always mean that they should, right? It can be very strenuous and very tiring on a relationship, right? And you want to be able to spend those final days, months, or years, just loving on your family and being with them rather than fighting about who's going to change the bedpan or who's going to help you with bathing and dressing and things like that. And it can be tiring on anyone. So it might even be that you need coverage for a nurse that would come in part-time. Like I said, have these conversations with your family and lift your loved ones. The final reason I will leave you with, it's, good to consider a long-term care policy and having this conversation, is to protect your assets. I've seen so many cases where you have a husband and wife, and let's say that the husband gets sick, because typically they die first, and they rack up so many medical costs in his care that when he passes, the wife is left with close to nothing to live on and for her own care, because they spent so much taking care of the husband, or vice versa, right? We've seen cases also where the wife gets sick and then the husband is left with nothing. It's never something where you want to have a situation where your spouse is left with nothing during their retirement and for their care. So these are all really good conversations to be having with both your financial team and your loved ones. This long-term care month, we are going to be diving in and having conversations as well about mental health in retirement, what it means to be taking care of yourself now pre-retirement to make sure you're really enjoying and healthy in retirement. So make sure you are keeping an eye out for our other episodes of The Wealth Cafe on LinkedIn and also on our YouTube channel. And I can't wait to see you all soon.